Hey everybody, it's Saturday evening and I'm going to be doing a water change, or probably more realistically a series of water changes here on my Waterfall tank. You can probably tell the water's barely flowing, the filter's all clogged, we've got really tan and stained water, so we definitely need to do a serious water change, filter change and all that. But what I really need to do is get the water changed because I've been spraying more soap, or soapy water, I should say, all over my plants up here. I discovered this morning that the aphid problem that I had before was not completely eradicated, and they were starting to come back in significant enough numbers that I was able to simply notice them by having a little look around. And the first place I noticed them was on this piece of water sprite, or Indian fern that is growing up and out of here where I've got it planted, and this piece had aphids on it, and of course that was hanging down here, and when you're touching other plants that means you've got aphids on those plants too. And if we look at the bottom of the leaves, I don't know if we can still see them or not, but I had aphids all over the bottoms of the leaves, which would probably explain why some of them are looking droopy and wilted. And of course, when I got up here and started looking at my philodendron, I noticed there were several areas where I had quite a lot of aphids, on stalks like this, on the underside of leaves. And so this morning I went around and I did an experiment. I used my water and hydrogen peroxide mix in order to kill the aphids. I thought that that was a good solution. It's certainly better than spraying soapy water into an area where obviously we've got aquatic life going on, and you don't want to get soap in your fish tank. That's just not a good idea. But I wasn't so sure that the hydrogen peroxide method was working. I don't know the exact amount that I'm supposed to put in there. If you put too much hydrogen peroxide in there, you'll actually damage the plant tissue. So you got to be careful with how much you're actually doing and how strong the concentrate is. So I mixed up a batch roughly about the way I've been doing it. I just kind of eyeballed it up and squirt some in. And I came back several hours later, and it seemed like a few of the aphids were dead, but a lot of them were not. And so I went back to my tried and true method, which is taking a spray bottle with water in it and mixing just a little tiny bit of dish soap. And you can even see I've got the suds in there. If you give it a little bit of a shake, you can see how sudsy that gets. Well, hopefully you can see how sudsy that gets. So that's maybe 4 or 5 drops of dish soap in that entire thing. So it's not a lot. I obviously didn't use even all of the, I believe that's 1 quart. So I only used that little bit. Most of it got sprayed, from this direction, away from the plant, away from the water and everything. So very little of it, I'm sure, got in the water itself. But as I pointed out, we've got really tannin stained water, and it just needs to do a water change anyway. So we're going to go ahead, just to be safe, we're going to go ahead and do a big water change and get as much of that soap that might have gotten in there out. But I wanted to actually talk a little bit about using the soap method. And this time I used far less soap than I normally would. Typically I was putting about a teaspoon of soap in that container, whereas now I'm just putting several drops in there, and we're going to see if it still has the same effect, because one of my viewers gave me a much better explanation for how the soap kills the aphids as opposed to the way I believed it did it. Now, the way an insect, for lack of a better word, we'll say breathes or exchanges gases, they don't have an active system. They don't move air. They don't have tidal lungs like we do, where we breathe in and out. They just have these tubes. Don't know the name of them, can't remember it, but these tubes allow the gases to exchange. The oxygen molecules move in, the carbon dioxide molecules move out, and it's all based on simple diffusion and higher and lower concentration rates inside and outside of the insect. So the way I believed that the soap killed them was that when the water dried up, it left the soap behind in a residue, and that residue clogged those pores, whatever you want to call them, and basically suffocated them. It blocked their ability to breathe, if you will. And that has always been my explanation, and it's good enough, but it's not accurate, I don't think. The way it was further explained to me, or I should say better explained to me, was that what happens is those tubes are so small that the surface tension of the water disallows the water from entering into those tubes, and that's why insects can get wet and not drown. But when you put some soap in there, you break that surface tension, or you reduce that surface tension, and then that way the water can actually flow into those little tubes, flood them out, and then that prevents the gas exchange because there's water in those tubes. So it's not the soap that's clogging the tubes up. The soap is simply there to lower the surface tension of the water, and then the water is what actually kills the insect. So that makes a lot more sense. And if that's the case, then I don't need a lot of soap. I just need enough soap to break the surface tension, and if it suds up like that, then that's plenty. So hopefully I can use far less soap than I've been using in the past, and I know that's an effective method at killing the aphids. So we're going to try it today with my reduced amount of soap, and we're going to see if the aphids don't die off. So I'm going to keep on going with some tank maintenance here. We're going to do, as I said, probably a series of water changes. Once the water gets a little lower, I'll top it back off, and then maybe I'll do another 50% water change or something, fill it back up. We'll get that water nice and clear. I'm going to wipe the glass down while I'm in there, change the filter. We'll get the waterfall flowing nice and vigorous again, and then we'll come back here in a little while and we'll do a little follow-up, and we'll see if any of those aphids are still alive, and we'll see what the tank looks like when we're done all this. So I know that was a lengthy intro, but we're going to call that part your before and after. So have a look at what it looks like now. Alright, here we are a few hours later, and the tank looks good. I removed that one frond that we had sticking out in front of everything. I've mentioned before in other videos that I like to have the front corner of the tank lit. That's what this spotlight is hanging here for. So we've got that turned on now, which gives us this nice bright color in the corner. But the real question is, did we get rid of any of the aphids? And we've definitely got some dead aphids, but I don't know if we killed all of them. I looked right here. If you actually move this over, you can see a little better. We do still have aphids, but I don't know whether or not any of them are still alive. When I touch them, some of them seem to just drop off. That doesn't necessarily mean they're jumping off. They could just be falling off because they're dead. I'm not really seeing a lot of crawling around once I put them in my hand, though. I did look at one that was on the underside of one of these leaves, and these leaves were covered with them. And now there's a few, but it's not like it was before. I mean, these were speckled and dotted with them. And so when I touch these, they likewise seem to fall off, or they're just sort of wiggling around a little bit, but nothing really becomes of them. So if they're not dead, they're well on the way, and large numbers of them were killed off. Now this leaf had come loose, and I just stuck it in there because it had so many on it. And if we just give them a little gentle brush, that should disturb them. Oh, I can definitely see some movement. There's some crawling around on there. But it's not very much, and it's only one or two that it looks like to me. So, we're making progress. That's just going to go right on in the trash. We're making progress. That does have an impact. It seems to have more of an impact than the hydrogen peroxide that I was using. I'm not really concerned about the soap getting in the tank. My initial response when I learned, that I had the aphids on here was, dread, because I didn't think I was going to be able to treat them the way I normally do, which is with the soapy water. And so I went into it really reluctantly, and the more times I've done it now, the more confident I grow. It's just kind of a pain in the butt. I feel like I need to do a water change when I do it. So possibly just wait and do it when I'm going to be doing a water change anyway. And I think from now on, that's what I'm going to do. Every time I do a water change on this tank, whether I see any aphids or not, I'm just going to get in there and spray everything down with some gentle, mildly soapy water, and hopefully we'll be able to stay on top of them. And if I am getting, if I am missing any, next time around, if nothing else, we'll stay on top of their numbers. If we keep them down to, unnoticeable amounts, then they're not going to be able to do that much damage to the plants. If we're getting to the point where I can just, see them on the various stems here and there from all the way back here, without close inspection, that's getting a little out of control. And I think as long as we don't get to that point, we'll be okay. Again, this is probably only going to be temporary. I can't imagine this thing's going to last more than a few more months before, the roots that are growing down into this start just, poking holes through the rubber. And, I've said all along, this was just going to be sort of a fun, semi-permanent project. Over time, it'll morph and change, and eventually it'll just be gone all together, and we'll do something completely different. I've already got an idea of what I want my next big project here in the middle of the floor to be, but we'll get to that later on down the road. The other thing I wanted to point out, two things actually, now that I'm thinking about it and looking at it. This weird looking plant here is not supposed to be weird looking like that. Here's some more of it. Really sort of curled, crumpled leaves. That is a juta or bugleweed, and it's supposed to look a lot more like this. And I think the reason we're getting all of that wrinkling and curling is aphids under the leaves. Now, every time I curl the leaves over, I never find any. I never see any under there. So I'm not sure why they keep looking like, oh, well, there they are right there. I just found them under this leaf. So, yeah, I'm going to definitely start, turning the leaves over and spraying each leaf. I already do that with these. When I spray, I turn every leaf over, and I spray the underside, and I spray the underside, and I lift them up, and I roll it around, and I spray everywhere as best I can. So, like I said, it's a little bit, intensive as far as labor intensive. It's a lot of work making sure you spray and cover all of this vegetation, but with aphids, that's just what you got to do. If you don't get in there and spray like that, they're just going to keep coming back, obviously. So the other thing I was going to point out down here is when I had put some temple plant in here, and then we got the aphids on the temple plant, I cut the stalk off just above the ground level, and I assumed that we would get new growth sprouting up from that, and we have not. And in fact, everything over here looks like it's kind of not doing all that great. My big piece of wood right here has broken and sort of rolled forward. Again, it's kind of rotting wood, and so the weight of all this wet moss and of course the wet wood itself has just broken it. It's rolled forward. It's kind of moved some stuff around up here. Again, this is sort of a living, evolving habitat that's, it's going to change over time. It's going to change constantly, and I'm not really going to keep rebuilding it and making it new again because it's not permanent. So I am going to add more plants though. I'm not going to worry too much about this wood breaking down. I'm not going to try to replace that or anything, but I am going to try to get something growing back here that's a little more shade loving. It's not going to get a whole lot of light back there. And then I do have a bit of temple plant that's growing out of my office tank upstairs, and once that's got a little bit of roots established to it, I'm going to go ahead and take a cutting off of that, and I may have to actually take a cutting and generate some roots on the cutting, propagate it myself, and then once I've got it established, I can put it in here. But I really want to grow some temple plant in here before this thing is all said and done, and that's about all I can think of at the moment now. So, alright, I think that's about it. I can't really think of anything else. I didn't do anything else while I was in there. I changed the filter, did the simple water changes. As I said, I did a series. I did 2 water changes back to back, and then I wiped the glass down, and now we've got it nice and clear and clean again. So that's about it. So, again, that's all I've got for this one. Thanks for watching. Sorry it was as long as it was. I wasn't really expecting it to be that long, but I got to rambling, as is always the case with me. So, again, thanks. Make sure you're subscribed. I'll see you real soon in the next one.